everyone, and welcome to Horror 101 with Dr. AC. My name's Aaron Christensen, and today we're going to be talking about a pair of direct-to-video releases, at least here in the U.S. And we'll be talking with my friend Gert Verbeeck, and I'm going to bring him in right now because we need to talk, my friend.
Hello, good afternoon there.
This is a double feature that's kind of in the vein of the last couple that we've done, but it's not from the care package that you sent along. But it was you were inspired, and I want to hear what was your inspiration that we talk about these two.
It was kind of like an organic decision. I mean, it evolved towards these two because the first two from the care package that we picked together were kind of coincidentally parts 1 and 2 of a franchise with no parts 3 and 4 and whatever.
Right.
And I don't know, it felt like, I think we talked about it and like, why don't we do a couple of those 1-2s?
Yeah.
And for some reason, the first one, popped in my head is like this one. It's been a long time coming since I watched those.
Because we did Scanner Cop 1 and 2, we did To Die For 1 and 2, and now The Terror Within 1 and 2.
I thought, like, for a second that this would be kind of up your alley because you do love, creatures with, actors in rubber suits, no?
Yes. Oh yeah. So, and we have a good monster in rubber suit here.
Yes.
And I was actually surprised. I seem to remember seeing Terror Within on the video store shelves for years and years and years. And so I would have guessed this was much earlier. Like, I didn't realize it's 1989, our first Terror Within. And I could have sworn it was like, I feel like I've been seeing this on the shelves my entire life because it has this great, that great poster image, of the creature and the pointy nails and the claws. So yeah, I didn't realize this was from 1989. I'd seen it before. It had been a while. I'd never seen the second one, which we will talk about as well, The Terror Within 1 and 2. So anyway, I'm glad that we're talking about these because I feel like I really enjoyed the first one for what it is. I'm not going to say this is a great movie because it's not.
I usually compare them like if you have classics or something. It's a refined dish with an entree, starters, and a couple of other things on the menu. And this is more like a good, tasty pizza. You feel like it. Except that maybe this is not like the takeaway pizza from an Italian restaurant. It's more like the deep frozen kind that you get.
Yeah, right. That's fair.
As far as a comparison, there you go. I mean,
but I think it's fun, and I think it's a great kind of example of, Roger Corman in the late 80s, the films that he was producing. Any thoughts you want to add on that?
It's very much Roger Corman production from as of 1990. He started even to remake his own films.
Right.
And it feels like one of those productions that got, reimagined, repolished. Yeah, in that sense, there's themes returning. I had to think, for instance, like you take Humanoids from the Deep,
sure,
and you add a little of his alien-inspired, Forbidden World.
Yep.
And voila, post-apocalyptic movies were still a bit ongoing during the late 80s.
Sure.
For sure. And also, I mean, take any movie you can think of that feels like it inspired this film. You're playing in a different league.
The screenplay, the story overall is, as you say, it's kind of a mishmash of a lot of other films. There's definitely some references to Alien and Aliens, like that we see here.
But we have to state clearly that this is an original script, and it's not a remake of any of his earlier films.
That's right. This is an original script in that it is. It was written not a remake of anything, but in terms of originality, I don't know that we can say that it's a very original script. Do you want to take a stab at the synopses, or shall I? The setup for this.
You may start with the first one, please. Thank you.
All right, sure. So for Terror Within, which again came out in 1989, which blows me away. Again, I just feel like this was always on the video shelves. But it is set in a post-apocalyptic setting where there was a virus that was created in a lab, and it wiped out basically 99% of the human population. And now there are these kind of outposts set up. We only get to see the one in the Mojave Desert, but there's also one that they're trying to communicate with the Rocky Mountain setup as well. But we have a group of survivors who are living beneath the earth, and the top side is populated by mutants, gargoyles, they call them. And I'm not sure if these are mutant humans or if they're just mutations of any sort. We don't really go into a lot of information about that. It seems like these are scientists for the most part who have also learned they know how to fight, they have weapons and things like that. And that's kind of our setup. And we're introduced to our team. There are two folks out there exploring topside, looking for survivors, looking for elements to create vaccine with, things like that. And that's how things kick off, because our first two people that we're introduced to are immediately annihilated by one of the gargoyles. And Andrew Stevens, he and George Kennedy are two headliners. Andrew Stevens has to go out and kind of search for them, and that's what kicks things off, because he inadvertently, directs the creatures back to the base, and then it's all about the terror within, because they are within and the creatures are trying to get in, but then they also realize they may have brought something in with them, and now the terror is within with them.
And the terror wants to get out.
Yeah, it wants to get out in a big way.
Yes, indeed.
So that's kind of our setup. Rambling though it might be. I'm curious to hear your thoughts, because again, I enjoyed it for what it is, and I'm guessing that you liked it because you were referencing it.
Well, let's just say that. I remember when I was a kid. I mean, I was in my teenage years already, so I had seen the good ones already. So, like Alien, like we mentioned, and all those, the classics. Let's put it that way. So, even back then, when I saw it for the first time, I was like, "Man, this ain't up there." So, of course, you see a lot more during the years, and now you can just kind of like put some different glasses on, and
that's right.
In a more entertaining way. So yes, there's fun to be had, and also things that will make you roll your eyes. It starts already with what you said. They describe the creatures as gargoyles, but it's kind of like mythologically incorrect to call them that way. We'll get to that in the sequel, because they have different names there.
Right. I mean, okay, so I'm going to talk about some of the good things I like, because I do think it starts off a little rough. I was telling you offline that, like 10, 15 minutes in, I was like, oh man, we're gonna have to talk about this dud. But then things start picking up. Like once they find a survivor, female, and they bring her in with them, Andrew Stevens and Sue, played by Starr Andreeff. They bring in the woman who's named Karen, and it turns out that Karen is pregnant, and it's an accelerated pregnancy where things are growing quickly, which again, very reminiscent of Humanoids from the Deep.
And we're getting towards the Alien, one of the two Alien references in there,
for sure,
in a different way, of course. Yes, and Starr Andreeff is kind of like the girlfriend of Andrew Stevens' character.
Not even kind of like, I mean, they are.
Yeah, well, yeah, they try to keep it hidden in the base, but then one character says, like, you cannot keep anything hidden like this in a place like this. And that leads also to some dramatic complications, which surprised me for both films, that they threw in some dramatic stuff there that is kind of like handled and dealt with in a hokey way, or I don't know the right word. It makes you giggle more than take it seriously.
Yeah.
In my opinion. The one woman survivor that they take into the base, she's pregnant, so that's kind of tough. Not by a human.
That's right. That we
father.
discover that, yeah, it's not a human baby.
Did this movie in some way make you think about women's reproductive rights?
Oh gosh, yeah.
You don't expect that kind of movie like that to do that, but now in this day and age, yes. Well,
Right.
my point actually being that at one point there are a bunch of people deciding to terminate the pregnancy without consent of the actual woman involved.
Right.
And that was a serious thought for a second.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's kind of strange to see that in this day and age.
Well, I think it does. It kind of harkens back to Humanoids from the Deep, because there we have creatures that are, raping the women, and it's very similar to this setup is very similar in that the creatures are looking to procreate through inseminating human females. Like that's kind of they're after the women. One of the characters actually says that at one point. It's like they're after the women. And I mean, like it kind of harkens back to like, the 50s, like Mars needs women, it's like, it's all about kind of like the women are instruments and here, I mean, yeah, you can get very, very deep on that in terms of a social commentary. It's the whole female as victim thing, right? Like it's an instrument. It's an instrument for drama, and I'm like, it feels in the same way that I feel like, rape in general in films is used too casually. It's such an easy kind of like emotional button to push. It's like, and here I feel like, it's addressed, but it's addressed so casually that we don't even think about it. And it's amazing to kind of like go, yep, that's how things were. That is how cinema was for the longest time, that, women were there to be protected and they're trying to get our women, et cetera, et cetera.
It's like you said, it didn't make people think about it in 1989, but now it does. Right. So
yeah, for sure.
That's the change of times now.
And that's a good, I mean, I think it's a good thing that we're actually having those thoughts now, as opposed to just taking it for granted, because in 1989, like you, I mean, I didn't think about it. I was like, yep.
True. And I mean, I was more fascinated by the creatures and all that. So in a way, it didn't resonate yet at that point.
Sure.
So
and hopefully it will sooner for future generations, which is, I love how deep we got over this cheesy, 1989 monster movie. But it's looking at the world through a different lens now. And I hopefully a more evolved one.
Yeah. Let's pick up the pizza again and talk about the movie.
So Terry Knotts, our director, the only other film of his that I recognize is Watchers 2, which I know you're a fan of. And that's actually the more faithful adaptation of the Dean Koontz novel.
I was a fan of the novel, and
right.
I liked the first one actually to see, a lot of people, I mean, it's not a faithful adaptation of the first Watchers, but anyway, we're sidetracking.
Yeah, sorry.
The second one was Roger Corman, let's say cashing in on the first one.
I mean, because let's talk about the creature design, because that, I mean, it's pretty decent. And Dean Jones is the creature maker. And I did not, I'm shocked and surprised and, sad that I didn't recognize Dean Jones as a creature maker, because Dean Jones to me always, what comes to mind is the Disney actor who was in, like the Shaggy DA and the Love Bug. Like that's the Dean Jones I know. But Dean Jones, our creature maker, he's done makeup on tons of films, everything from like, Oscar-winning films like Lincoln with Steven Spielberg to Tobe Hooper's Toolbox Murders. He did Mask of the Red Death for Corman. He did The Convent.
Yes, indeed. I didn't know this about the creature maker there, what you just explained. So that's interesting. And the creature is pretty decent. It's a full body
full.
makeup suit. I mean, there's a bit of like animatronics
you
with
could
the lips going on.
Yeah,
It's pretty cool. The cast, I seriously have no idea who is all running around in that film. Same for the second film, except for the names like Andrew Stevens, Starr Andreeff, and then we have the two big names, George Kennedy.
right.
And we'll wait for the second film. So, what did you think of the cast? Because Starr Andreeff has a bit of cult value on her resume.
So she was in Vampire Journals, Club Vampire. Like she was,
what was one of the films that people remember the most or are the biggest fan of is one where she starred as a lead actress, Dance of the Damned, I think.
Right.
Late 80s, early 90s vampire movie also again.
But the thing is, like, I mean, Starr Andreeff is kind of like your perfect Roger Corman heroine in that, like, she's kind of vacuous. She's not great with dialogue. She's attractive to look at, but like she's not a great actor, especially when it comes to saying lines convincingly. But she brings an attractive quality. Anyway, so we have some heavy sexual politics going on, and let's talk about Andrew Stevens real quick, because I first became aware of him. He was the lead in a TV miniseries called The Bastard, which was an adaptation of a John Jakes novel. It was a series of novels eventually, but then I became aware of him from as I got further into his career. Like he was in The Fury. He's in Massacre at Central High. But yeah, so he had kind of quite a career as an actor, a young actor.
Yeah, indeed, and that's how I came to know him. The Fury. He was a young actor in that one still, 79.
Yes. 78, yeah, I think so.
And I didn't see much of him afterwards until a couple of these kind of movies. Around 1989, he was like making a switch from only acting to also writing, directing, and producing. It seemed to steer towards either soft erotic thrillers or mixing it with genre, like vampires or something like this. And I remember we had a kind of a joke, like, okay, when you see Andrew Stevens' name on a film, and he's playing a supporting role, yes, that's okay. As soon as he starts playing the leads, like, keep it. So, I mean, not to diminish his career, because he became very prolific afterwards.
Oh, yeah.
With, the threefold role of producing, writing, and directing. So, and now we're talking about him again. So,
well, I also remember him from The Seduction, the movie with Morgan Fairchild. David Schmoller directed it, and he plays like an obsessed fan. He's quite good in that, and I think he's actually a pretty decent actor given the proper material and direction.
Yeah, and his co-cast, the one he can play off against. It makes everything a lot better. I was aware of the first thing. I mean, the Terror Within 2 is the first thing he ever directed, and
right.
Roger Corman had to be involved in helping him out making the switch.
Oh yeah,
like Corman always did in the 50s and the 60s, like working with young people who had careers, directors and actors and writers.
I mean, Corman all through his career,
The
idea that he gave Andrew Stevens his start, I'm like, absolutely, that totally tracks with Roger Corman.
Certainly. Maybe we should jump to the sequel now, because unless you
no, I think just to kind of put a button on the Terror Within.
Yes,
I feel like it's a solid monster movie, and like once you kind of get into it and you realize the kind of movie you're in, it does well. Like there's some good amounts of gore. There's not a lot of nudity, despite the fact that we were kind of talking about like the question about whether how the female characters are treated. You don't get to see anything.
It doesn't push the envelope, and I mean, it keeps things respectable, let's say.
Yeah, that's right. So yeah, I'd say The Terror Within is a fun, late 80s direct-to-video monster movie. Nothing more, nothing less, and definitely, a good kind of popcorn burner.
There's a lot of bloodshed there, so
Yeah, I had a good time with it because the creature's like slashing its victims and leaving these big claw marks, and yeah, it's fun. I enjoyed it. Which leads us to The Terror Within 2 from 1991. As you mentioned, it is Andrew Stevens' writing directing debut, and he also stars again. And the first we see of him is him wandering the wastelands, heading toward the Rocky Mountain lab that he mentions in the first one. And he's got a pretty terrible fake beard on. And I'm like, oh,
wonderful.
buddy, who do we blame that for? Oh, wait, you're the director. Okay, so that's all your fault, my friend.
Can I comment on the fake beard?
Please comment on the fake beard, because I couldn't stop commenting on the fake beard.
That fake beard had me go Googling to see what the distance is between the Mojave Desert and the Rocky Mountains, to see, like, does that fit? Because it's kind of like, it's not like really like a hermit living for decades.
Right.
It's nicely trimmed even, and then you see a scene later that he actually does trim the thing.
Right.
Like, what?
Oh man.
So it made me look up some geography about United States of America.
Do you remember how far he had to travel? Like, how far is it?
I didn't know. I just looked on the map and okay. Estimated the distance. So
it's probably like 1,000 miles or so.
Okay, so does the beard fit? With some trimming?
Yeah, exactly. Well, and I like how he trims it later and gets himself all presentable once, he's in the presence of another female.
Oh, please don't go there yet.
So tell us a little bit about the setup for part 2.
The film pretty much picks up shortly after the first one, and has Andrew Stevens trying to make his way to the Rocky Mountain setting. He rescues a brother and sister. Well, actually only the sister, because the brother dies, right. From an attack by the creatures.
Right.
Very early on. And as you said, there's like a bit of a love angle added to it at some point, very soon already. In the meantime, we also have the crew in the Rocky Mountain facility,
right,
developing their own problems. And at some point very soon, Andrew Stevens manages to contact them. They get his messages, so they know he's on his way. And by then, complications arise for Andrew Stevens, and also within the facility, the underground facility. And once Andrew Stevens get there, well, things escalate. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. And our cast, we've got a few more recognizable names this time. I think it's funny that we have our supporting actor, George Kennedy, is swapped out for R. Lee Ermey.
What do you think?
And we have Stella Stevens. We have Chick Venera. What do I think of R. Lee Ermey? I love R. Lee Ermey. I was like, oh man, why are you slumming in this movie? But I feel the same way about George Kennedy. I'm like, George Kennedy did so much schlock, and I'm like, you're better than this. You're a supporting actor, Oscar winner. What are you doing? But that was George Kennedy. He did like 180 films. And it's like, he was a working actor, and he did some Hollywood prestige, and he did a lot of kind of B and C grade films as well.
Both of them. I mean, it's the kind of films that you say, like, you guys deserve better.
Right.
But my question was, what do you like if you have George Kennedy or R. Lee Ermey?
Yes.
Which one is your, favors you the most?
Oh, if I had to choose between the two of them? Oh man, that's a tough call. They're so different. I would say, I would probably say that George Kennedy, I like what George Kennedy does more, but I really like R. Lee Ermey. So I would hate to have to choose. I would love to see them in a movie together.
Okay, the reason I ask is just because they are both like up there on their own pedestal.
Yeah.
But I like the fact that R. Lee Ermey brings a certain liveliness to the role.
Yes.
For me personally, it was like a solid replacement. Let's thank you in this film. At least there's R. Lee Ermey. I mean, his role, he's firm, with people.
Yeah.
But he's open to reasoning also. When
Well,
decisions
okay,
have to be
so
made.
and I should have mentioned this when we were talking about the first film, because George Kennedy, I feel like, is totally slumming it. Like, he is phoning in this performance. He's not really invested in it. I just felt like, oh man, he's just kind of glum. And I was like, this is George Kennedy going, I'm a supporting actor, Oscar winner. What am I doing here? Whereas
Probably.
Arlie Ermy, this is still relatively early in his career. He'd done some early stuff in like the 70s, 80s, but he didn't really explode until 1987 when he did Full Metal Jacket. And, Mississippi Burning, and, like this was kind of like him ramping up in terms of actually having a career as an actor. So I can see him kind of taking this job, and again, I feel like he's working, like he's trying
He's taking it
to do
serious. It
exactly.
shows. So that was
I think,
an asset, a little upgraded the movie a little bit, seeing him.
and
And the
Stella
fun part is that,
Stevens, go ahead.
well, I'll spoil things.
Okay, watch this. Spoiler banner.
Wow. Thank you. The fun part is they got the big names in there: George Kennedy, Arlie Ermy, for the sake of actually having them not make the end of the movie. They have to die.
Right.
So it's kind of like you expect that to happen to Arlie Ermy in the second film too, because he kind of,
right.
it was first role kind of destiny in the first film. Okay, thank you for.
All right, done with the spoilers. I wanted to say Stella Stevens is another, kind of Hollywood mainstay. She'd been around since the 60s, and here we are, in the 90s. She's had a storied career, and done lots of ups and downs. And this is, I would say, she's better than this film, but she does her best right alongside Arlie Ermy.
Stella Stevens. It was a name that I saw on credits before.
Mm-hmm.
I just couldn't remember anything I saw from her, so I looked her up quickly. I even didn't know or forgot that she's Andrew Stevens' mom.
Is that right? I did not know that.
It is. It's like, really?
That's funny. Okay, hey mom, would you be in this movie? My first movie?
Yeah, I'm directed by. It makes
great.
sense.
Okay, I like that. I like
That
that so much better now, actually.
Now, in terms of the genesis of the Terror Within 2, it really feels to me like as if the idea of like, let's make a sequel came during the shooting of the Terror Within 2, like talking to Corman, like, we can do this. I mean, not exactly shooting it back to back, but it must have been conceived during the shooting of the first film. I mean, that's what the Terror Within 2 feels like to me.
I feel like the relationship, he probably created the relationship with Corman there. And so when he was looking to make his movie, he knew exactly he could go back to Corman and say, hey, because that was kind of Corman's MO, right? He'd be like, hey, if you can do this cheaply, we'll do it. If you can make this cheap, if you can make an idea that feels marketable, then let's give it a shot.
To me, they feel pretty similar. I mean, it's the same kind of setting, the same kind of sets. So
here's my feeling about this. And again, I don't know whether to attribute this to his, it being his first time directing. And not even so much, it's like they just didn't care to class it up. They kind of knew what they could get away with. What's the bare minimum we need to get away with this? We need a name supporting actor or two. So that's Arlie Ermy, that's Stella Stevens. We need a monster suit. We need some pretty girls. We need to have some, Andrew Stevens decides to throw in some nudity. It's like they were like checking boxes for making a low budget exploitation movie, and that got him the gig. And he made the movie, and it kind of started a career for him.
It was instrumental while making a switch, like mentioned before, to the directing, producing, and writing part of his career. That's what it looks like, at least.
And I would say that, like we get one thing we can say is that it's a more multicultural cast. Like we see a lot of different ethnicities represented, as opposed to the first one where we have one black guy and you know he's going to get killed, and he gets killed early. And it's like, okay, that seems very kind of 80s cliche. Whereas here, you know, again, we have a broader spectrum of representation.
So I will try to throw in some positives here. Also, we have a lot more women in the cast.
True.
A lot more than the first one. So it's kind of like, hey, diversify a little bit. Something that was appreciated, I would say, to see a bit more liveliness among the cast members.
In terms of the film itself, like this is, I feel like this was a definite step down for me. I mean, when you're talking about, you know, the first film being kind of like a low budget sci-fi horror flick, this becomes the next step down. And that's where I start kind of like going, you know, like, I don't need a lower budget sci-fi horror film. I need a low budget. It's fine. Lower budget, I'm like, I hate when you see them like starting to cut corners on a movie that's already, you know, operating bare bones.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, I can't really distinguish between the both of them, like one being better than the other. I mean, the first one, yes, in terms of the kind of film, the kind of narrative it is, the first one is a bit more tight, consistent. Yeah. It gels better. The second one, you can tell they try to throw in other stuff to at least compensate. I got the same kind of entertainment out of it, and I didn't have to take it that serious this time. Because here, I mean, at some point you mentioned it, like when he meets the surviving sister in the beginning, and also
who's dressed like she's out for like a camping weekend. You know, I was like, you've been surviving out here for how long? I mean, they look like she's got her khaki shorts and her hiking boots. And it's like, you just look like you went out for a hike and now.
I'll fly with that. They do have their little home inside the rocks there.
Sure. And presumably like a washing machine, like behind, and, you know, like a gap that's down the street.
I know. Well, the other thing is like they have their conversation to get to know each other a little bit at the campfire thing that they have going there. And then all of a sudden, Andrew Stevens makes a reference to the creatures, which are now called Lusus. And he proceeds to explain, like, it's derived from Italian, meaning a freak of nature.
Right.
And I mean, it made me giggle, the whole concept and setup, him explaining it. So I was thinking, if I was to put on my feminist glasses and dial the notch up to like radical meaning like 11, not 10, I would so call Andrew Stevens out for like mansplaining this to a woman, which of course wasn't the case. And then I thought further, like perhaps somebody in the script was like, Andrew, you can't call them gargoyles anymore because that's like cultural appropriation, historical distortions. You know, even you can't do that. You have to find a way to correct that. And then he does, and it leads up to them having a love scene. It's like, what kind of movie am I watching here?
Right.
So,
and that is kind of how it feels.
It's nothing offensive. It's just like what the film makes you think of now couldn't have possibly made you think of then.
Right. Well, and I mean, I feel like we are watching a young filmmaker. Let's call Andrew Stevens a filmmaker. We're watching him kind of find his way. You know, he wrote a screenplay that is very derivative, and he's trying to inject some new life into it. They're just like little. He's trying to hit like certain plot points. He's got dual storylines that eventually converge. You know,
he had a great mentor in Roger Corman to tell him, you need to cook all this, man. And in comes the nudity this time. Which, I mean, it's clear that all the actors and actresses didn't have a problem with it. So
right.
I mean, the
two lovemaking scenes.
Well, yeah, the first one was kind of like a tease because
at the campfire, you see it through the campfire. Yep,
the campfire is a tease.
Yep.
And then they decide, we'll give it to you anyway, back in the facility. He's like, oh, okay. We're watching a Roger Corman movie.
Yeah, yeah. The second one feels more like a Jim Wynorski version. That's kind of, I think that was kind of I was like, okay, this is the Jim Wynorski version of Terror Within.
It's not a big compliment for filmmaker Andrew Stevens at this point, but still.
I think he'll be fine. 140 films in, I think he'll be okay.
But again, like you said, it was his first film exploring all facets of it, acting in it also.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's a couple of misfires, and I'm dialing back to the first setup with the dramatic elements,
Yeah,
which are present again in the sequel. I mean, after the lovemaking scene at the campfire, the woman tells him, she's called Ariel.
Ariel, yeah.
Ariel tells him she's pregnant. And
right. Oh my gosh.
if you know what happened in the first film with Starr Andreeff,
right,
you'd expect Andrew Stevens to be, well,
this guy just creates monsters
there, no? And he goes like he's kind of happy, smiling, and I was like, it's not really in sync with all the terrible things that happened in the first film with the pregnancy.
Well, here's the other question, and I'm going to throw up the spoilers banner for this as well, is that if she knows she's pregnant after having sex with Andrew Stevens, when she is later violated by the creature, how does she get pregnant again or pregnant with a creature?
Voila. I mean, I had the same question to myself, because when they make it to the facility, the violation had already occurred, and then they recreate it with computers like this must have happened like that.
You're like,
but what? I mean, I can understand if it's
a
like
a sperm working its way into the egg, and it's like, well, it's already fertilized. It doesn't work that
way. I mean, it's not like there's two eggs and there's twins. You know, it's like one happened after the other. So,
but hey, then, good old sci-fi science.
Yes, and in addition to that, back to the drama and the acting and the emotional range appropriate for the scene, or in this case, inappropriate. When they mention that thing, happened right before the scientific explanation on the monitor screen, Andrew Stevens has to admit, like, yeah, she was pregnant, and suddenly he's like feeling happy again, like, yeah, I'm gonna have a kid, while everybody's dying and mutating and blood and guts. Is like, oh, okay, that's a nice moment. Happy for you there.
Yeah. So ending spoilers there. But the so yeah, it's a I would say if Terror Within is a B grade monster movie, Terror Within 2 is a C grade monster movie, and it's entertaining. It's not bringing not much new to the equation, except for things that feel like eyebrow raising. Like, really? Does that work? But like, what? Any kind of like final thoughts on the series itself?
Well, compared to since we're wrapping up the Terror Within 2, well, I liked the fact that Arlie Ermy stepped in courageously. Also, I mean, this time they tried to, like, we got two creatures, not one, and the origins, it's a different breed. So,
yep.
I mean, are you getting worth for your money with only that? Yeah, probably not. But do I have thoughts on the series? Oof.
Well, you kind of just said it. I mean, you feel like it's kind of a continuous story. It goes, basically you can watch one right after the other, and they follow the same narrative.
Voila, and it's kind of like this feeling that I had, like it must have been conceived, the idea, like, let's do another one during the first one, and then that's why it's maybe not wrapped too tight, the second one. But yeah, a minor footnote in the double bill direct-to-video sequels.
There you go. That's high praise right there. So we'll be back for more of these for sure. I'm definitely enjoying this adventure together. So
I'd like to thank you for the endeavorment of sitting through these two films together with me once more.
Yeah, no, and thank you for the inspiration to revisit them, because I'd only seen the first one. Now I could put a box, I could check the box of having seen the second one as well. But yes, we will be moving ahead to future ventures together, hopefully of a higher quality. Until then, keep searching, keep exploring, and keep sharing the scare.